so pleased to learn today with Rabbi Asher Lopatin, who is the executive director of the JCRC AJC of Detroit and the founding rabbi of Kehilat Eitz Chaim of Detroit. He's also the founding director of the Detroit Center for Civil Discourse, a Rhodes Scholar and a Truman Fellow with a Master's in Philosophy and Medieval Arabic Thought from Oxford University. Rabbi Lopatin has also done doctoral work at St. Anthony's College, Oxford, in Islamic fundamentalist attitudes towards Jews in Israel. He has written chapters for over 20 books and numerous articles. Prior to moving with his wife, Rachel, and their 4 children to Detroit, he served as the president of Yeshiva at Chovevei Torah Rabbinical School, and before that served as the rabbi of Anshe Shalom B'nai Israel congregation in Chicago. Rabbi Lopatin received ordination from Rav Aaron Soloveitchik and Yeshivas Brisk in Chicago and from Yeshiva University. Rabbi Lopatin is a permanent member of the Council on Foreign Relations and on the board of New Detroit. I have been a great student of Rav Asher for many decades now, a follower of him, a learner of his Torah, and appreciative of both his passion and his nuance and his sensitivity and his collaborative, inclusive approach and empowering others. I'm thrilled to learn with him and be in conversation with him today. And thank you all so much for joining. Okay, Rav Asher, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much, Rav Shmuley. What an honor to be here. And I have the nice weather.
Recording in progress.
Okay, good. We're good. Good. There's a little bit of an echo. Well, I'll keep talking. There we go. Beautiful. So actually, one of the things that I'm both the rabbi of a small shul in Detroit, Kehilat Eitz Chaim. It's such a joy. And also the director of, as Rav Shmuley mentioned, the Jewish Community Relations Council, AJC. We're a bridge to from the Jewish community to the broader community. So actually, I was just at a board meeting of New Detroit this morning, where it's really a coalition of whites, browns, blacks, everybody to fight racism. And that's sort of what we do here. And what I'd like to talk about today, the sources I'd like to share, they're really just 5 sources, will touch on this issue of Judaism connecting to the world around us. And it's very challenging, especially, there's a lot of talk about anti-Semitism and it is on the rise and everything, but it's also a climate where Jews are accepted in marriage. And I heard a statistic, 72 outside of Orthodox circles and perhaps outside of New York circles, 72% of Jews marry non-Jews. We're accepted into all the country clubs. I don't know, all of them. I did watch the episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry David tries to pretend he's Protestant, but thank you, Eddie. But in general, the challenges in our society, we are so well accepted outside of the Jewish world that it's a real challenge for us. It is always a challenge building bridges and coalitions, as Uri Litzedek knows, or Shmuley knows, all the different organizations associated with it. But it's also an interesting challenge of when do we work just for ourselves? When do we say if I'm for everyone, I'm for no one? Rav Shmuley, this was so interesting when you donated your kidney. I remember you struggled with this. Like, do I just say for everyone? Do I say for Jews? And so what I'd like to look at now is certain decisions that were made by some of the giants in our religion, and really not sure was the right decision. They're listed in Tanakh, and so maybe Tanakh, our Bible, is endorsing them, but it's not totally clear whether these are the right decisions, and maybe we can explore that also. I was just in I go to shul every morning, and then Sunday afternoon I was in a church, and my previous psak was from Rav Aaron Soloveitchik that Rav Shmuley mentioned. I have to say that Rav Aaron Soloveitchik's two of his grandkids, one of them is Mayor Soloveitchik, very well known, and spoken at a lot of Republican conventions. Nechama Soloveitchik, his granddaughter, Rav Aaron Soloveitchik's granddaughter, is the chief communication director for the Nikki Haley campaign. So Rav Aaron Soloveitchik always said he was a Democrat. So just want to put that out there. But Rav Aaron Paskin, for me, and Rav Aaron was very, very much in favor of civil rights and for the equality of all people. But he had a ruling of not going into church. You're not allowed to go into the sanctuary of a church. You could go into like the anteroom. And so this helped me out with my friends, Christian friends who got married. I could see them get married, but I couldn't go into the church. And even Rav Aaron Soloveitchik's paskin, you couldn't even go into a mosque. Now I work for the AJC, American Jewish Committee. And again, a lot of my job is going into mosques and going into churches and going into Hindu temples even. And so I actually follow the psak of Rabbi David Rosen, who's, Mickey Rosen of blessed memory. David's his brother, big rabbinic family. And he's a big Talmid Chacham. And he's really specializes in psak and religious law regarding, can you go into a church? What can you do? Can you stand up? Can you bow your head? Can you this and that? So he's much more, I should say, lenient than Rav Aaron Soloveitchik was as far as going into connecting with the other religions in that way. It's still jarring when I go to, and those of you who are maybe baby boomers will get this. When I go to a Hindu temple or a Hindu event, we do with the Hindus Diwali, and they're singing Krishna, Krishna, and I remember from the 70s and 80s where we would run the other direction if there was a Hare Krishna, and then Nebuch, I deal with there's Moonies, the Unification Church, and it's all there. So I want to look at some sources that are very much kind of rejectionist, and where there is an opportunity of coming together with surrounding religion a little bit, surrounding people, and it was rejected. And I want to, we'll go through them, and then I'd love to have a discussion and people's feelings about them. Three of them are Torah Shebichtav, or from Tanakh. And we're really free. It's not a halachic thing. It's open to discussion. One of them is Raban Gamliel. It touches more on it's a little bit more on Torah Shabbal Peh, a little bit more on halachic practice. And one of them is just crazy. So that'll be fun. The last one. But also, I'll say that my own. One of the things I do is advocate for Israel, and we advocate for shared society in Israel. And so I'm personally like a big advocate for shared society in America and in Israel and everywhere, that people should live together. I'm for immigration. We need more immigrants in this country to make this a better country. Let's come together. And in Israel also, Arabs and Jews and Palestinians, Israelis. So these kind of the setting for at least the first three sources feels a lot like the early decades of Medinat Yisrael, of Israel. Now, the state of Israel, thank God, is celebrating 75 years this year. Very exciting. And it might feel like in a different place than it was in the 50s and 60s. But I think when we think about what did it feel like then, it was a little bit like the Shavei Bavel after the destruction of the first temple. It seems most of the Jews from Judea and Benjamin go into exile into Bavel. into Babylon. And then 70 years later, Cyrus the Great says, okay, you can return to the Holy Land and you can rebuild your temple. And a very small group goes, a little bit like, again, if you think of Israel in the maybe even before Hakamat HaMedina, even before, maybe from the Balfour Declaration, let's say. And also, there are only 600,000 Jews living in Palestine in 1948. So small, a smattering of the Jews in the world. So it's sort of a little bit kind of like that. Like Cyrus says you can return. The British Empire says you can return to Palestine. And how do we work out things with the people that are in the land? So just like it's not true that a people without a land needs a land without a people. There were people in Palestine and Israel, in the Holy Land, when Jews came to it, and there's still people there. And likewise, when the Jews came back from Babylon, there were people there that they found, the Samaritans, normally called the Shomronim. I had a Rabbi Rakov in Chicago, who theorized that these might not have been foreigners. These might have been Jews who stayed, who didn't, we know with Gedaliah, after the destruction of the temple, there were still Jews that were in Israel and Judea. And then when Gedaliah was assassinated, and they either go to Egypt or Bavel, but there might have been a substantial amount that were still in Israel, but they were kind of cut off from traditional Judaism that's in Babylon. So when they come back from Babylon, wherever these locals are that they encounter, they see them as foreigners. So the first source, and let me share my screen. And here we go. This hopefully will, there we go. Oh no, what happened? Oh, here we go. Okay, can you see it? From the book of Ezra. And we'll have a couple of slides from the book of Ezra. So Zrubavel, Nebuch, not such a famous guy. Ezra, Nehemiah, we kind of know Ezra, people are named. I don't know anyone whose name's Zrubavel. I would not be surprised if the direction modern Orthodoxy is going in, Zrubavel is going to be a more popular name. It's kind of like, pioneering the land. And Zrubavel seems to be like the secular leader who returns to the land. And so if you look in the third chapter of the book of Ezra, in the 7th month, they all came, gathered to Jerusalem. 7th month is probably the month of Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot. And you have Joshua, the high priest from Yotzadak, and the priest. And then you have Zrubavel, who is the leader, the secular leader, it seems. Probably Zerubbabel's moment of glory is Kate Bavel Zerubbabel. If you remember it 2 months ago when we sang for Hanukkah, Kate Bavel Zerubbabel, Lekate Shivim No Shati. Unfortunately, it's not in the first verse of Ma'os Sur, which people know. It's in the second one or the third one. So no one says that either. So Nebuch, Zerubbabel, but he's a hero. He's the leader. And they're doing Sukkot. It's wonderful. And then in Ezra chapter 4, so here's one that needs interpretation. The Tsarei Yehuda, the adversaries of Judah. Now, Tsarim implies that they are harming Judah and Benjamin. They're causing tsarot. But it could just mean that they happen to be enemies. It's not clear that they were causing problems yet. But certainly, Yehuda and Binyamin, these were the Judeans with some Benjaminites that returned from Babylon. I have to do it by the way. I have in Detroit, we have a large Chaldean community. These are Christian Iraqis, Catholic Iraqis, and their homeland is Iraq, and they are very excited that the Jewish homeland is kind of like Iraq because Bavel, and way before that, Abraham from Ur Kasdim. So we're doing a trip possibly in October to Iraq. If anyone is interested, and anyone on the on Facebook is interested, be in touch. We'll see what happens, but that's a potential trip. So they're coming from Babylon. Very few. Nebuch. Again, think about Israel. How many came to Israel before 48? 600,000. Now Israel probably has more Jews in it than any other country. I mean, America, it's not clear what our numbers are, but about 7 million Jews in Israel, 7.5 million. So very few come, but Zrubavel's wanted to come. And these enemies, they hear that the children of the captivity are building the temple unto the Lord. Now, it's also interesting that language, children of captivity, shows that there's really a sense of they're the foreigners. We're the indigenous people, these folks, whoever they are, and you are coming from the diaspora to build your temple. It's a lot of interesting parallels. Again, it's clear in Tanakh, these are Judeans and Benjaminites who God promised the land to, right? And we're living 70 years before that in the Holy Land, so they're part of it. But it looks like, it's interesting, Bnei HaGolah, these exiles are coming back and they're building this temple to God. So this is these are some painful trigger warnings, some painful verses. They Vaikshu el Zrubavel Roshei Havot. Now, sometimes Vaigash, like in the in Breshit, it could mean strong, drew near in a powerful way, but it could be in a loving way, a caring way. And they say, let's build with you. Let's build this with you. Ki kachem nidrosh le'elokechem. We believe in the same God. Now, this is very cute. This is thank you to Safaria and probably the JPS version. Velo anachnu zovchim. So the way it's written, Lamed Aleph, kind of means we don't bow down to God. But really, velo, the tradition, the Cree, as it's read, is to God we bow. We're Jewish. We bow to God, same God, from the days when the Assyrian king brought us here. Now, there's a whole backstory that these are Geirei Arayot. These are converts because of lions and elsewhere in Malachim. After the northern kingdom was destroyed by the Assyrians, this is like 100 years before the Judean kingdom was destroyed, the southern kingdom. So the northern kingdom was destroyed, kingdom of Israel. Assyria took out all the Israelites, the northerners, and brought in people from all over the place and into the land of Israel. And they did not have a good time. The lions were eating them. So they decided, what are we supposed to do? So they heard that they have to worship God. So they worshiped God and they were saved from the lions. So they're called Geirei Arayot. Were they true converts? Not. These are the Kutim in the Talmud. There's a Tosfot about it. There's a lot of discussion. Are they real? Did they convert a second time? So they are Jewish. Anyway, but their narrative that they say is that we pray to God. Now, I find this a very sad pasuk in this Zrubavel, verse 3. So, so verse 3, Zrubavel and Yeshua. Now, beforehand, it mentioned Yeshua, the high priest, and Zrubavel in that order. I might argue, I don't know, but that here Zrubavel and Yeshua answer together. It seems that maybe Zrubavel is leading the argument and he's pushing. And they say this, and I honestly, I just find this a very painful pasuk, but maybe because I'm like leaning heart liberal or something like that I don't like it. I don't know. They say, Lo lachem velanu livnot by leilokenu. You have, I like this translation, you have nothing to do with us to build a house unto our God. No, we're not going to do this together. Ki anachnu yachad nivneh. We ourselves will build it to God Elokei Israel, the Lord of Israel, not your God, only our God. Now, of course, God's the God of everybody, but very nationalistic. Kasher tzivanu, and then they say, well, and as Cyrus commanded us. So look, I understand that maybe let's have a more cynical read of this, and that is that these enemies wanted to infiltrate the Jews, and they were going to go in with the Jews, and you don't want to deal with them. They're going to destroy you. It's not going to be, first of all, it won't be a Jewish temple. It'll be kind of a universalistic temple to God. It's not our shul, right? So, I mean, I know they're like, actually where I am in Detroit, we have a wonderful mono-Orthodox shul, and a 3-minute walk, a 5-minute walk from our shul, there's another lovely modern Orthodox shul. And then another mile away is another mile. Everyone has their own shul. We don't want you. But, and in this case, again, maybe strategically, and that's the argument. And most of the Mefarshim, the tradition is very much smart move, very smart move, because if we would go in with them, they either would have sabotaged our efforts or they would take it away. It wouldn't be the house to the Elokei Yisrael. But, when you think about the way Shlomo built the Beit HaMikdash, he brought in the king of Tsur. He brought in foreigners to help him build the temple. And also, the holiday that they were celebrating was Sukkot. And traditionally in Jewish Torah Shabbat Pen, the Talmud, Sukkot is the international holiday. In fact, in I don't think I have it here. Let me see. Yeah, wait a sec. So in the book of Zechariah, Zechariah 14, and we read it as a Haftorah. I think we read it as a Haftorah on Sukkot. God demands that everyone celebrates, the non-Jews celebrate Sukkot. And if Egypt in verse 17, those that don't come up from Jerusalem, they're not going to get any rain, God says. In verse 16, everyone is supposed to come up. They should come every year, bow down before God. Now, it doesn't say Hashem Elokei Yisrael, God, the God of Israel, in verse 16. It says the Lord of hosts. Everybody, they have to celebrate Chag HaSukkot. And if Egypt doesn't do it, boy, they're not going to get any rain and, everything. So it's a little, and that's, by the way, Zechariah is a prophet from the Second Temple period. He's talking to Zrubavel, and elsewhere in verse 4, he talks to Zrubavel. So I don't know. I don't know if Tanakh really wants us to get the image that what they did was right. I would argue that it's Sukkot, guys. They want to come help you build their temple. Why can't you, let them help you? Now, what results when they say no Then Tsaras, and their chapters of Tsaras, the people that weakened the hand, real Jew, and they harried them. And, they're, I don't know, they seem like they're very Jewish. They hired lawyers against them. They hired lobbyists. They're not Jewish. They're, I don't know, American or whatever. So they have lobbyists and they have lawyers to go to Cyrus the king. It's all a political mess to get them to stop building the temple. So look, eventually the temple does get built. So, okay, we thank God. And then it gets destroyed, of course. And then we have the land of Israel. We have the state of Israel. But I wonder if this is an argument that goes on now. Like, how much can we work together? How much should we mix? How much should we say, no, we Jews are going to do what Jews do, and you do what you do? And maybe the message of Zechariah that everyone should come up to Jerusalem. Okay, you can answer, well, they should come up to the Jewish temple. But it really seems that there is an element, and also, again, from Solomon's temple, from the first temple, of maybe we should do things together. So I just really want to raise that as a question. And then it kind of gets a little bit worse. So not worse. And again, maybe that was the right thing to do. And I think I haven't seen a commentary that says it was wrong, except for Zechariah seems to say it might be wrong. But then things get even more intense. So in the book of Ezra, he's such a pious person. And in chapter 9, after they come and he, look at the verse 10 above it, before chapter 9, Ezra set his heart to seek the law of the Lord and do it, and to teach in Israel. What a good neshama, what a pious person. But the people say, Lo nivdilu ha'am Yisrael konim me'amei haratzot. People are intermarrying. Now they're doing one of their abominations. They're following their abominations. And the holy seed, this is verse 2, here, the holy seed have mingled themselves with the people of the lands. So there's a real mixture here. And I think it's very important, again, for contemporary Judaism. There are two elements here. One of them is about the mixing with the abominations of the Canaanites, the Hittites, Perizi, etc. So one of them is that they're intermarrying and they're becoming pagans. They're losing their Judaism. It's all gone. The other argument in verse 2 is really much more of a nationalistic argument. Arvu zera hakodesh. The holy seed is now mingled. Very, I don't like this kind of language, really. I mean, I love zera kodesh. I love the language that we're holy, but this mixing, Mongolizing, adulterating the zera kodesh, the holy seed, it kind of bothers me. And meaning that maybe that's not the right approach. Maybe it's certainly, I'm very sympathetic to the approach of when intermarriage leads to giving up Judaism and weakening Judaism and all that. It shows that it's a big challenge. But when we think about it sort of in the sense of, you have holy seed and you shouldn't mix with unholy seed, I think that's a very different way of viewing it. And I'm glad that the book of Ezra separates the two. And yeah, I'm sure traditionally it's been read that both are bad. But I'm really glad that the book of Ezra separates the two, because I think in contemporary understanding, we think about America and intermarriage, we really have to make that separation. And the newer statistics of children of intermarried couples show that more of them are raising their kids with Judaism than before. it might be a generational thing, but it also might be that initially, maybe 30, 40 years ago, whatever, intermarriage was such a taboo that people that did intermarry, even 20 years ago, felt rejected by the community. Over the last few decades, again, for better or for worse, I don't know, but they're not, I think for better. People who intermarry are not feeling as rejected by the community, and they're feeling they can be part of the Jewish community, and therefore they're raising their kids more Jewish. So look, this is a huge, huge issue. It's also a huge issue how we deal with people that are syncretic, that are raising the kids both Jewish and non-Jewish. We had someone in Chicago, wonderful woman, pretty religious, and she had a boyfriend who was Catholic and pretty religious, and they did get married. The wedding was kosher with a justice of the peace, because it was an intermarriage, but it wasn't just he's not, I don't know how the kid is being raised, but, and you know what's so interesting is that their friends came. And I think that, you know, the from Pasuk Aleph, it's so important to whatever we can do to make sure that when people are intermarrying, they're bringing up their kids as Jewish, they feel that the Jewish community loves them and wants them to raise their kids Jewish. So anyway, we don't have to get so much into that, but it's a real challenge. But definitely Ezra, he's very much anti-intermarriage, and but he has an approach that he tries to inspire the people not to intermarry or to get rid of their non-Jewish spouses, wives. It's all him. He plucks his hair off my head and my beard. I sat down, and everyone and from the evening, I arose from the fasting, and I fell on my knees, and I prayed, and I this, and I that. And then look what happens in chapter 10, when he shows people, however he does, that this is a terrible thing. Then people come back, and everyone cries, and and the men and women are crying. And they say, we're gonna reject them, and we have broken faith. We're going to have married from women. Now, therefore, let us make a covenant. They'll pull away all the wives. It's a little bit, these verses are a little bit vague, because the wives, it seems, are there. You know, in verse 1, it says men, women, and children. So in verse 3, they're getting rid of these women and those who are born. Maybe if you look up in the end of verse 2, and it's a little bit of drush, a little bit of homiletics, yesh mikveh liYisrael al zot. So the literal meaning is, now there is hope for Israel concerning this thing. But again, I'm a rabbi, a little bit drashic. You could say yesh mikvah. If they go to the mikvah and they convert, then we have a solution. There is a mikvah for Yisrael. There is hope. There is a ritual bath that can enable them to convert. And maybe, I don't know, I don't want to give a gloss over it, but maybe that's what happened. That was their rejecting the women. That's what happened. But when we turn now to, I want to get this. Sorry, okay, I think I have to, second, sorry, let me see what we can do. We're going to get this, but 1 second, sorry. Okay, Nehemiah. Okay, here we go. Now, we love Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra is like, a giant. We'll come back to Ezra a little bit before we're done. But Nehemiah, Oh my gosh, she's such a wonderful person. And honestly,
Really quickly, can you show your accurate sources? I think we're still on the same one.
Oh, does this not say Nehemiah?
No.
Oh, okay. 1 second. Okay, so thanks for that comment. 1 second. Let me please move the window away from the share. Let me stop sharing, and now let me share again. Here we go. Okay, is that better? Can you see Nehemiah?
Yes.
Great, thank you. And by the way, I've been talking so much and a lot of controversial things. So, Eddie, I'll look to you to go. If anyone wants to jump in here. So, Nehemiah. Having said that, let me continue. Nehemiah, such a special person. His story is. He hears that they're not doing well in Israel. And by the way, this is something that in America, I know where there's a lot of trauma with the judicial review of Israel and the right-wing parties and very painful. But there is a side like just to know where people are coming from, where the Ben Gvir people and the Smotrich people supporting them are coming from. Some of them are coming from they're so desperate to help the Jews. Now look, that's not an excuse for things, but anyway, he hears that things are terrible. They said unto me, the remnant that are left in captivity are in great affliction, or it's terrible. But the problem is, so I'm very upset, he says, and the problem is, I just want to read these so we're a little bit sympathetic to Nehemiah. And he prays to God. And then he has a conflict. He has a very prestigious position in the palace. He serves the wine. He's like the butler in the Joseph story. The butler, lives. The king sees that he's not looking good. He's upset about Israel and the community. And then he opens up to the king, and he, and this is a big sacrifice for him to open up to the king, first of all, and to really the king sends him to Israel. So, but he is a radical, he's a zealot. And first there's all this stuff about Shabbos and how we can make them keep Shabbos. And look at now, towards the end, he sees that the women had married women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. Interesting, not Canaanites, but foreigners. And so interesting, the verse 24, it's like cultural, like the kids are not speaking Yiddish, whatever. The children are not speaking Hebrew. They're speaking Ashdod. Maybe these are Philistines. They're speaking Phoenician. And they don't know how to speak Hebrew, Lidaber Yehudit. And that's the cry. I mean, Dan is with Prisma. That's like the cry is why people aren't learning Hebrew. And this is living in Israel. They're not speaking Hebrew. So what a shanda. So there's a sympathetic picture that's painted that here he made Aliyah to Israel to help them out in Israel. And besides them not keeping Shabbos Kodesh, keeping the Sabbath, they're intermarrying. I mean, it's a little bit again, I don't think it's happening as much, but in the 70s and 80s, when people used to celebrate Sylvester, which is like January 1st. It's like we don't even have it in America. It's like a European Christian celebration of Saint Sylvester on January 1st. And all the hotels were like, if you do a Sylvester party on January 1st, we're going to close you down. We're going to take away your kashrut. It was such a big deal. I think now with more of the Russians coming, it's not as much of a big deal. But you understand that it's traumatic for him. This is the Holy Land, and they're not speaking Hebrew. But so we've seen different ways. So Ezra's way of dealing with it is inspiring the people. whatever he did, he fasted, he tore out his beard, he prayed, he sat on the floor and everyone joined him. That was one way, I think, and that's one way for us, again, when we feel that we have to carve out Jewish space, to do it by inspiring, by showing how meaningful Jews marrying Jews is, or Jews being, connected to the Torah, whatever it is. In Nehemiah, who's also heralded as a great man, he has a different approach. He cursed them, he smote certain of them. And now, Ezra pulled out his own hair, but Nehemiah pulled out their hair and made them swear. So it's a different approach. And I think that, again, by Tanakh presenting both approaches, I think it shows that maybe one is preferable. Maybe now, again, if I were a zealot and in Israel, maybe I'd say, look, we got to be like Nehemiah, and Meir Kahana used to talk about intermarriage and the problems and all that in Israel or wherever, and making it a law against it. Ezra does not have that approach. Ezra is all about, I'll do what I need to do to create the Jewish atmosphere that I think is important for the Holy Land, for my community. Nehemiah takes this other approach and smites them and plucking out their hair and all that. And okay, Asher Lopatin disagrees with Nehemiah's approach, but so be it. But this idea of where, and by the way, Ezra's approach also might have been, let's reach out to them and Yesh Mikveh Yisrael, right? Let's get them to convert. These beautiful kids, let's get them to be involved in Judaism. And how many stories do we know of someone that either their parents were Jewish and had no interest in Judaism, they've become interested, or, their parents weren't Jewish, or one of them was Jewish. And, so that's the Ezra approach. Here, it's none of that, and, knocking it all down. So we jump a little bit. Here, they're just starting the Second Commonwealth, like in the 7th century, 8th century before the Common Era, 7th century before the Common Era, just starting to build the temple, and eventually, they get things started, and you get the period of the Anshe Knesset Agdolah, the men of the Great Assembly. You get the Mishnah, and then we get. No, I don't want that. Okay, let me go. Let me stop sharing for a second, and sorry. No, sorry, 1 second, almost there. Yes. Okay, and let me now, how do I share my screen? I don't even, oh yeah, Zoom. Share screen. And here we go. Okay. Okay, Eddie, can we see Cursing the Christians? Okay, look. So this is by Ruth Langer. She has a whole book on this. You can, if you're more interested, Cursing the Christians, the History of Birkat Haminim, right? We have the famous blessing in our Shmoneh Esrei for the tattles of the Lamashnim Alti Tikva in our prayer, Kol Harishah, all the evil should just be destroyed, Zadim, all these bad people. And Ruth is going to talk about much more in her book, but basically, the Birkat Kohanim has been enigma for centuries, and Christians, the earliest Christian fathers, they think the Jews are cursing the Christians, because we say minim. Well, actually, we don't have our version. I'm an Ashkenazi Jew. We don't have a chol haminim, right? We have like zaydim. We don't have minim because it was censored. Because minim is an old term for Christians, early Christians. So the Kyrgyz, so it seems that the theory that many people had is that when Christianity was just starting in the first, second century of the Common Era, they were Jewish Christians, basically. They were part of the Jewish community, right? And you have in the New Testament, the whole discussion, it was really Paul who changed it, took away the law. But before that, the church, James, the brother of Jesus, was in Jerusalem, and they were kosher and they're celebrating Pesach and Matzah, or that, and but they apparently didn't believe that the temple should be rebuilt. This is after the destruction of the temple, so late first century, early second century, let's say. And they believe in Jesus as the Messiah. Let's say it's second century. So there was a problem, like, how do we deal with, first of all, practically, and if we remember, Zrubavel was dealing when the locals wanted to build a temple with them. Practically, are they going to be, spying on us? Are they going to be a fifth column? Are they going to sabotage our efforts? That's what people felt about the early Christians. But also, and they would tattle to the Romans, perhaps, when someone said, "Oi, let's build the temple should be rebuilt," boom, right to the Roman authorities, and that person was arrested. That's the story that's told. But also, you can understand that people were really angry. They were worried that these Christian Jews would corrupt the regular Jews. How do we get rid of these Christian Jews, these heretics? There was an effort with totally different. Please excuse me, everyone on Facebook. But there were some that felt that Chabad had such outlandish views of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would come back as Messiah. And the Rebbe, people accused certain Chabadniks of almost, saying, praying to the Rebbe and all this stuff. And there are books about this. And very interesting, I find, that with all that, Chabad, we know they do Shabbos, they do Hanukkah, they light the menorah, they do Shabbat, the Shabbos candles. They do everything very Jewish. And in the end of the day, and this was, the Rebbe has been gone for a long time, decades and decades. They're still part of the Jewish people. It's great. In fact, on college campuses, you either go to the Hillel or you go to the Haredi group, Ma'or, or whatever it is in your campus, or you go to Chabad. Those are the three choices usually. So I don't know, maybe this was a mistake. If they really tried to kick out the early Christian Jews, because of their philosophy, maybe in the end of the day, it was a mistake. Just like, because maybe and maybe not, it would have turned out like Chabad is today, like, okay, you don't believe in their philosophy, or you think this Chabadnik, they're messianists or Mashiachists or whatever. Doesn't really, we're all together. People can push back again. They can still think Chabad is this danger. But after decades and decades and decades of this, I think we see that, we're okay. So it's a real question. Now, Ruth Langer, we don't have to read the whole thing, but she argues, I think I boldened this, hopefully, somewhere after this long article. No, I didn't. But anyway, she kind of argues that might not be true. And you can read the whole book, that later on, this bracha was seen to be, like she says here on the top, we simply do not know who the original meaning were. It can mean kinds of sores. In the high Middle Ages, it definitely referred to Gentile Christians. But this bracha was written by Raban Gamliel, who is first century towards the early second century, right? Let's see where she says, times him. That's really early. Raban Gamliel, circa 100 CE, plus or minus. I was right. So either end of the first century, beginning of the second century of the Common Era. She thinks there weren't enough Christians around, and it's really Lewis Martin, a Generation Judaism scholar, that this was the scenario behind this, was the descriptions. The Christian says they were evicted from synagogue according to the Gospel of John. And this is maybe what the Gospel of John was referring to, but she's not so convinced about that. And that makes me feel a little bit better because, again, I think we have a model of Chabad. It's very different, not comparing the two in severity or whatever, but there's an example of you could make this argument that it's such an anathema and it's dangerous, and everyone, if you go anywhere and you want kosher food outside of the main cities, you go to Chabad. And everyone does that. Pretty much everyone does that. And because if you're keeping the mitzvot, you're part of it. So this is a case of where I think it was, if it was designed to reject the early Christians, maybe that was a mistake. Who knows? I don't know. An interesting side note, and then I have one more source, which is really crazy. So we'll have like 4 minutes for it. I was talking to a friend today that we're hosting our federation. Many federations bring their state legislators to Israel, and of course, AIPAC brings, federal Congress people to Israel. And he said they were having a meeting of them, of all in Michigan. And a lot of the rabbis that they know are Messianic rabbis. There are a lot of Messianic Jews for Jesus rabbis. This goes back again, the 70s and 80s, the Jews for Jesus, they're going to convert our kids on college camp. I remember Shmuley Boteach, Rabbi Boteach, he earned his early cred by arguing with Jews for Jesus people in Speaker's Corner. But in any case, and I remember seeing on TV, sometimes they'll have a rabbi on a talk show, and he's a Jews for Jesus rabbi, like a Messianic Jew. It's like, terrible. But, a lot of good Christians who love Israel are looking at these Messianic Jewish rabbis as those are the Jews they know, really difficult, it's problematic. And it's always like, oy gewalt, how low have we fallen that we've normalized them? But on the other hand, what are you going to do? You're going to say you're to an innocent legislator who wants to go on a trip to Israel, your rabbi is a fraud and should be kicked out and is trying to destroy. Whatever you say, like, okay, whatever. So that's just sort of a sidebar. I don't know what to do. It's a real challenge. We have some Chovevei. Rav Shmuley is from Chovevei, and so I remember I had when I was a rabbi in Chicago, one of my interns was a Chovevei guy, an amazing rabbi currently, and he had a Friday night oneg about whether we should accept Jews for Jesus as part of the Jewish community, which we don't now. They're not part of any. When you have gatherings, board of rabbis, they're not part of it. But he was saying, like, why not? And another rabbi in my shul, from that time on, he thought that Chovevei Yeshivat Chovevei Torah was a bastion of Christianizing Jews, and that was all it was about, is trying to bring Jesus into. So anyway, it's a really kind of a taboo subject, by the way, which it's not, right, yeshiva, but this goes back, this idea, was the battle, if there was a battle against the Christians, was that a legitimate battle? And I'll end off with, okay, I hope, Eddie, can we see Simon the Righteous? No. Okay, so I'm going to stop.
Rabbi,
sharing.
we also, if you don't mind, we want to leave a couple minutes for questions.
Oh, great. Okay, can we go over for a minute or?
Okay.
You want to see the source or not? Well, let's do questions. It's fine. The theory behind this is that and this is some crazy Facebook post, but it has some good sources, is that we fast on, there is a source that seems to imply that you fast on Asara b'Tevet, on the 10th of Tevet, for someone who was Simon, who was Peter, St. Peter, Simon of Calphus. Why would we fast? Jews fast for Simon the Righteous, because there are these theories that he was a pious man, and the reason he was a disciple of Jesus or something and did all his stuff was in order to ement lishma, for God's sake, for Judaism's sake, to bring the early Christians out of the Jewish community. So he wanted to create a Christian religion so that these early Christians would not corrupt Yiddishkeit in the shuls, similar to Vilam al-Shani, but in a different way. And therefore, he is a righteous Jew. Nebuch, he had to do this to save the Jews. Again, there's that sort of a theory that would say, and it's not totally crackpot. There are other sources that talk about that, even that Paul was also a pious Jew who just saw the danger of these early Christians embedded in the Jewish community and found a way of pulling them away and creating a whole new religion. And therefore, Judaism is safe today. My argument kind of is, I'm not that we have to be careful. Sometimes when people want to join with us and join with them, it's a good thing. We shouldn't be so afraid. But there are a lot of these traditions that are very much afraid. Eddie, I'm good. Can we go for 10 minutes for questions? Are we okay with that? Or okay, let me stop sharing and stop talking. So Eddie, does anyone have any questions, or of Shmuley, or?
Folks, feel free to unmute yourself or type.
I must have said something controversial today, but no, you're a good crowd. Lonnie, good to see you from Detroit. I think good to see you. Look, so I think I pose a lot of questions. And it's public policy. You can't paskin necessarily on public policy on that's like in the Haredi world, they talk about dot Torah. That sort of, the rabbis know what direction we should go in. But it's not really clear always in this sense. And I would just say that I struggle with it. When I'm in a church, I do want to make sure that I'm a good Jew and that I'm really loyal. And is this okay that I'm here? It's okay that I'm singing along a song. It might not mention Jesus, but it's like, God is everything. There's a great gospel song or a Baptist song, God is my everything. That's a great song, but it's a Christian song. So yes. How do you pronounce your name?
You're pretty close. It's Aglaya, but you can say Aglaya. I take Aglaya also because it's actually a technical pronunciation. But anyway, it's just I was thinking just in terms of larger historical trends with exclusivity and self-preservation, because a lot of the time, though, it's about self-preservation. But my question is, I'm wondering, though, when does it become, just from what I know of a lot of different trends throughout history, when does it also become like, okay, you've got, I want self-preservation, so we need exclusivity, but then it starts to hit reality. Like, are you going to be able to keep your culture going if you are so exclusive? I don't know if we touched on that and I missed it, or yeah.
No, it's a great question. And I think that Rav Soloveitchik, or Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, who was born in 1903, and came to America in the 30s and established Maimonides school. And he really established modern Orthodoxy. Modern Orthodoxy, I really believe, is Rav Soloveitchik, and he, I think, he felt that Orthodoxy would not survive in America unless it kind of opened up. And he did his PhD, and he did in Europe, but unless it was really open up, because I'm a believer that he was really Haredi, but in order for Orthodoxy to survive in the 30s and 40s and 50s, you had to kind of open up. So Maimonides' school, his school is still co-ed, and girls learn Talmud with boys. But it's a pretty frum school. It's not like girls are reading Torah there, anything. It's a mixture of really holding on to the tradition and yet figuring out he really felt it would not, I think that it really would not survive unless you went to Harvard. You could show that you could be a frum Jew and go to Harvard University. And by the way, he was really a hawk. He's, as far as going to church or anything, like from what I heard, he said it was prohibited to watch Kennedy's funeral because it was a Christian thing, even on TV. It was a real hawk in certain ways. But I find it very fascinating that the Haredi world is thriving. Now, the ultra-Orthodox world, I believe, is influenced from the outside, and they're into sports. They like sports and a little bit, and but this idea that you really have to integrate significantly in order to survive, I don't know. I mean, we're just seeing that the Haredim are, and God bless them, they're very successful, and they're maybe becoming even more and more extreme. And so it's a real interesting I'm modern Orthodox, like Nebuch. I believe that we got to integrate and it's important, and I believe it, but I'm not sure how, whether it really is succeeding, in a utilitarian way, really. Like that's the way, maybe it was, Rav Soloveitchik might have been right, that in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you needed this kind of modern Orthodoxy to preserve Orthodoxy. But it might be that in 2023, just from which kind of Judaism is going to survive, let's say in America, it might be ultra-Orthodoxy. And I'm going to stay modern Orthodox. That's who I am. But it's just really a fascinating times to see the incredible success of Haredi Judaism, which really it found a different way of staying cloistered, but in very limited ways being part of society. The Satmar, they play, who to vote for, and they swing all their votes for Hillary Clinton, and probably, Nebuch, they vote Democrats, crazy. But, but you can't argue that they're, really mixing with society and opening up. So very great question, Aglia. I think we have time for one more question or pushback. And I'll just say one other thing. I mean, but why not? I'm kind of a libertarian. I'm kind of like I'm sort of like Ezra. Like if I believe that I would love for people to all keep Shabbat. Okay, if that succeeds, then that'll succeed. If it doesn't succeed, it doesn't. So like some people argue, like, well, we can't let women do certain things in synagogue because then it's going to be all women and men are going to be chased out. Well, sorry, if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. It's not a reason not to let women do it. So men have to sort of step up and, and become useful. And, that's our problem. I'm for a very, sorry, Agla, you can laugh. I'm like for a free market. Like it's a free market. And that's what in Ezra's Israel, it was very much a free market. Nehemiah was, no, if we don't like what you're doing, we're going to beat you and smite you and all that. But again, in the case of Zrubavel, whether to work with the Samaritans or not, I mean, that was the Jews' choice. Jews have a right to build a temple on their own, but there are consequences. And maybe the consequences are more negative. I don't know. I guess, it's all retrospect.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Asher. I know you started off by saying it brings you so much joy to share such great Torah, and it lightens up the world. Your Torah was phenomenal today. Thank you so much for bringing this blessing to us today. I want to say another huge thank you again to Rabbi Asher for providing such a great class. Thank you, all of you who are on this call, who are going to be either watching the recording or joined us on live. We appreciate you. Just a quick reminder that next week we have another two great classes. One class with Rabbi Jeremiah, the principle of morality over ritual and prophets. Following up that with Rabbi Jason Herman, values and the reality of politics and social justice. Friends, it's been a blessing to learn some phenomenal Torah with an even greater speaker with Rabbi Asher. We appreciate each and every one of you. Have an amazing day. Take care.
Take care, everybody. Thanks so much, Eddie and Rav Shmuley and everyone.